This degree of minor devastation is beyond your capacity. Nas and Benzino didn't merely respond to Jim Jones in a live feed that resembled a virtual funeral more than a dialogue. They completely destroyed him. We're talking about a burnt earth, with no survivors and no compassion. And yes, the internet took off. But hold on, how did we end up here? Nas is the king of poetic elegance, isn't he? Benzino has been clowned more times than we can count, hasn't he? And let's just say that Jim Jones should never have spoken, because the second he attempted to make sly remarks about the legends, they pulled receipts, made jokes, and revealed decades of behind-the-scenes information. Beef that was unexpected. Filthy money, industry backdoors, and family secrets. Yes, everything was broadcast. Is this personal revenge wrapped in bars? Or is it just rap beef? Was this a planned slaughter or an unplanned live stream? In any case, Jim Jones chose the wrong day to go live. And now Benzo's jokes and Nas's deft takedown may overshadow his legacy. Have you ever witnessed a man's reputation being destroyed in real time, on camera? Because when Nas and Benz joined forces and set the internet on fire, that's precisely what happened to Jim Jones. The rap world ceased as soon as that live stream was broadcast. Breathing, just pure. Unadulterated chaos, no PR departments, no filters. Jim wasn't prepared. Either. What began as a lighthearted exchange evolved into a pure act of poetry. And you know who's getting it? The same person who has been talking about Harlem street codes and Dipset loyalty as if they were copyrighted. This whole affair has been simmering beneath the surface for years. So let's go back a little. Jim's dubious remarks, his subtle jabs at interviews and nausea, and that absurd tirade over Benzino slipping off in the clubhouse. Yes, they did recall everything. Additionally, they served last night, with a camera rolling 800K people watching, and memes emerging before Jim could blink. Retaliation was cold. This is when things get wild. Not all of it was personal. Rap wasn't the only thing that Nas and Benzo released. They revealed something darker and more profound that has the potential to completely change the image Jim has been promoting for decades. The conversation erupted when Nas remarked nonchalantly, "You know, some folks are really out here acting like they're kings of the culture. But they're just court jesters with good Wi-Fi." Without even mentioning Jim's name, everyone knew he was gunning for him. With a hard drink in hand, Benzo leaned into the microphone and spoke the remark that ended careers. Building a legacy on the bones of others is not possible, particularly when invoices from your own skeletons are still present. The screen went blank. Jim attempted to go live. His group made a mess. Then, like a middle schooler having a tantrum, his own burner Twitter account began to clap back. However, the harm had already been done. They began researching, rewatching previous interviews, and bringing up old feuds, and what they discovered. Jim's entire story began to resemble a produced theatrical Netflix script, complete with plot flaws. Benzino did not hold back, so let's talk about the Dipset drama. He left aimed directly at the Harlem jugular. On camera, the man sobbed about loyalty. Benzo chuckled, but he neglected to bring up his 2010 betrayal of Cameron over a Roc Nation contract. The comments section went crazy. Unverified screenshots, old emails, and even a purported audio tape off Jim's scolding cam behind his back while buttering up a Def Jam for executives have all been published. There wasn't much for Nas to say. He simply smirked, sat back, and allowed the timeline to be choked by silence. You can tell it's real that way. Only someone who has witnessed the game from the throne, not the stands, can have that kind of confidence. And at last, people began posing the pertinent queries. Who is actually in control if Jim's image is just smoke and mirrors? The answers are messier than you would expect, dude. Jim's team allegedly manufactured whole street fights for engagement spikes. According to a purported industry whistleblower who says he worked with Jones during the Lost Talent era. The insider asserted, "We had Google alerts on ops." The same. Insider revealed a spreadsheet with templates for fictitious social media beefs, including one tab titled Nas Plan B that included bullet points on how to trick Nas into a fictitious fight for streams. "We dropped these based on what was trending, not what was real. Take a moment to process that. You're out here, selling hoodies by feigning a grudge with legends." Do you recall Jim's attempt to disparage Nas for his lack of contributions to Harlem? Benzino retaliated forcefully. "While you're out here using promo codes to sell Henny knockoffs, that man put half of Queensbridge through school." Snake emojis started to be used all over the discussion. Things went nuclear at that point. After an hour, supporters began looking through old grant documents and discovered that Nas had actually contributed to the covert, undisclosed funding of several Harlem after-school programs. Jim, on the other hand, was said to have promised a Harlem Youth Center since 2014. Can you guess what's still absent? A structure, a design, or even a license. The live stream became a digital trial at this moment. The evidence was coming in, like subpoenas, even if Jim wasn't there. Screenshots showing him reportedly embezzling money intended for a back-to-school function. He can be seen yelling at a community organizer in a leaked direct message. The internet did what it does best when an audio recording appeared that featured a person who sounded a lot like Jim saying, "Man, this charity stuff is just PR. Nobody actually cares." After running audio filters, cross-checking voices, and retrieving timestamps, it matched. Abruptly. The man who positioned himself as the people's champion, but his Shopify business seemed more like a discount. When Benzo delivered the final blow, the chat room erupted and the atmosphere completely changed. "Jim's not even from Harlem. Harlem doesn't move like that. Harlem doesn't fake beef for likes. Harlem doesn't exploit the block to flex on the gram." This was an intervention, not merely a takedown. A man clinging to an image that couldn't withstand a Wi-Fi connection was all that remained after the glamour and clout subsided. This is where the second section begins. Because just when you believe it can't be any more ugly, the legal vultures began to fly around. When Jim Jones casually joined that live stream, anticipating the typical back-and-forth clout chasing and petty sneak-and-die tactics, he had no idea what was in store for him. However, what he entered was a verbal ambush. And it was Nas and Benzino who were the shooters this time. Yes, you heard correctly. Together, Queensbridge royalty and the most unpredictable wild card in hip-hop analysis completely destroyed the internet. It was not merely trivial, poetic, and ultimately fatal to one's career. The entire comment section burst into flames as Nas leaned into the camera and shouted, "Let's talk about that fake legacy. July fireworks." As if it were WrestleMania, Benzo was already getting warmed up and entertaining the audience. "We're done letting y'all rewrite the culture," he growled. "This is the correction tape era." The audience was in disbelief at what they were seeing. Ness, who is often calm, taciturn, and measured, had officially lost his patience. And in the midst of the pandemonium, Benzino was flourishing. It became ugly at that point. Like a prosecutor with receipts, Nas began dissecting Jim Jones' entire rap. The major act was Never You. With a calm but surgical tone, Nas remarked, "You were always the loudest in the background. You've had a classic before." "Oh, you've had. Where features?" The conversation was going crazy. There were a lot of memes. Hip-hop beef history was already being declared on Twitter timelines. In the meantime, Benzo fueled the flames by saying, "You've got all the muscles, but no bars." Jim Jones. They then played interviews, clips, and even old recordings of Jim contradicting himself on various podcasts. According to Benzo, he has recordings of Jim attempting to purchase his way into the Source Awards in the past. He said, "Yeah, I got the voicemail. Jim was sobbing and pleading for a second date by requesting to be on the cover. Isn't that crazy?" It didn't even matter whether that voicemail was there or not. no longer matter. The story had already gained momentum. It was more than just Jim's music or lack thereof. It had to do with the image he had developed over the years. The gangster rapper who became a podcast philosopher, the diplomat soldier, and the Harlem kingpin. However, would have none of it. The gatekeepers won't let you into the actual rooms because of this. In places where there ought to have been harmony, you kept adding drama. The conversation stopped. People began speculating about the identity of the artist. It was real life. According to some, J. Cole was murmured by others. Jim wasn't just a mouthpiece, though, and the point had been conveyed. He was said to be a serpent in the business. Finally, Nas and Benzo displayed what they referred to as the sponsorship files for Jim Jones, a shadowy PDF that, in there, opinion described how Jimmy reportedly bought off various influencers and bloggers to maintain his reputation. Ever ponder why he wasn't in the top 5, despite having every conversation? Because the man's media spending exceeded his jewelry tab, Benzo inquired. It was harsh, vicious, humorous, and popular on social media. You could sense the change in tone as the stream reached its boiling point. Jokes and stealth kills are no longer acceptable. This was being disassembled. A man who hardly knew how to move his pawns was playing chess with. Nas Benzino was laughing at the smoke and throwing explosives, as well as the internet. Every moment of it was adored by the internet. Abruptly, the live broadcast transitioned to an enigmatic guest caller with a disguised voice and a hazy identity. They identified themselves as a former member of Jim's team who worked as a PR assistant. She asserted that everything they were saying was accurate. Instructions to purchase, engagement, phony partnerships, and even tales inserted onto gossip blogs were given. I no longer care that I signed NDAs. The truth must be known by the public. It didn't matter if she was genuine or not. This scandal was now an uncontrollable wildfire. Nas leaned in one final time, her face graved as the call came to an end. Hip-hop is more than simply rhymes, you see. It concerns courtesy. The day you began to believe that volume equals value, you lost yours. Then there was quiet. There was only a black screen with no outro or farewell. That quiet, however, spoke a lot. Hashtags were already popular by the end of the stream. Jim Jones, the most vicious of them all. Legacy check, Jim Jones revealed. And Enna said what he said. Everybody had a viewpoint. A few supporters attempted to defend Jim. At least he preserved Harlem. They let out a yell. Others joked that Jim needed a career resuscitation and created funeral memes. Remix videos of the roast were all over TikTok. Even famous people began to respond in subtle ways. A mysterious laughing emoji was uploaded by Charlemagne. Don't get it twisted, though. Ramia went live with the caption, "Told y'all years ago." Fat Joe just remarked, "Damn." Jim was determined to battle his way to the end. Hours later, he began to make insinuations about a reply. However, that response is where things take a very different turn. And what Jim says next? "Oh, you're not ready for that? Let's keep going." But just when everyone thought the dust was finally settling, Benzino put fuel right back into the fire. With more than 100,000 and the camera still rolling as the live audience stared at the ground. He produced an actual manila envelope and waved it as if it were a trophy. He slammed the letter down on the desk as if it contained nuclear codes and yelled, "Jim, do you want to talk history? Do you prefer loyalty? Then let's talk about this little contract you begged me to shred in 2009. The conversation erupted. Benzo was being begged to open it. He inhaled deeply, then gave the audience a smug smirk before opening it and removing a heavily redacted copy of what he said was a confidential agreement between Jim Jones and a former Rockefeller official. Jim allegedly consented to release internal information in return for preventing a financial collapse. The crowd lost control. The commenters were yelling, Snake reaffirmed that Jim was not a rat. For a full 10 seconds, even Nas just sat back in startled quiet. It told it everything. That quiet. The real former Rockefeller executive, going by the pseudonym B.K. Truths, joined the live stream just as things were about to get out of control. The information he dropped was not hidden, but his voice was. Supposed whistleblower claims that Jim Jones had a 10-year habit of jumping ship whenever the vessel began to sink. That man is only interested in surviving. The live broadcast reverberated with the voice. For a feature, he will sell out his own crew. The audience was gobsmacked. Within minutes, screenshots of the stream became popular on X. Jim's rap legacy was abruptly interrupted in less than 30 minutes by Nas and Benzino. Read one tweet with 600K likes. Jim became known as the king of contradiction as fans began comparing his lyrics to his real-life moves. It was more than social media, though. In a matter of hours, the entire industry was affected. Jim Jones was quietly removed from the lineup of a well-known Atlanta festival. Everyone was aware of the time, but the promoters said it was because of unforeseen scheduling issues. Record labels started removing his name from previous joint promotional materials. And there were whispers that even his longtime buddy and partner, Cameron, was thinking of releasing a statement to distance himself from the controversy. "Oh no. Jim," he said in a leaked audio clip of an alleged interview with a PR crisis team. "Man, I didn't think Nas Benzino would really go there. I thought they'd keep it cute." This is much more incriminating. Not now. NS returned to the live stream and delivered the decisive strike. Serene, chilly, calculating. His voice was low but as keen as a sword as he gazed directly into the camera lens. It has nothing to do with hate. The truth is at issue here. Additionally, it might have been sitting too close to the fire if it burns. Boom. The remark is currently widely used in YouTube films, Instagram Reels, and TikTok. In fact, there are fan-made edits that have cinematic music playing underneath them. It's being treated like a battle cry by Generation Z. It could as well be the catchphrase of the decade.